And welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to another week, another edition of the KSL, the Korean Starcraft League. A bit of a replay cast, actually, a replay cast. This event did occur a couple of days ago. It happened over the weekend, but unfortunately, Friday and Saturday as well, I did fall ill. I was under the weather, and I could not cast live. But thankfully, shout out to, of course, Chicken Man, Dave Testa, all the people behind the KSL, the Patreon as well. Thanks to that, of course, they do provide replay packs to the people, to the casters, to the patrons, and we are able to cover these via replays a couple of days later. So welcome, everyone. Welcome. Hope everyone has been having a great time. A massive shout out to Soundo in the chat. Thank you so much for resubscribing. 35 months. That's a lot of months. That is a lot of years, actually, as well. It's been a long time. Thank you so much for all of your support. We always appreciate it. And yeah, we are here to catch up on some KSL. Over the weekend, we missed out on 2 broadcasts. We missed out on KSL and we missed out on WTL. I think it was day 5. I think WTL Code A day 5, and we casted day 6 and 7. So I don't know how much it's worth going back and casting day 5, especially considering we don't have a slot available this week, but maybe we can come back to it. Well, we'll see. We'll see if we have some time next week. For those wondering, we do have a couple of broadcasts lined up throughout the next couple of days. We have the KSL today, tomorrow, GSL qualifiers. The GSL qualifiers did occur a couple of days ago. We have confirmed players for Code S in GSL, and the event was not casted live. The qualifiers for GSL they're never casted live, but they did provide replays also to their patrons. So we do have access to those replay packs, and we will be casting the Code A qualifying matches for GSL tomorrow and the day after. There's a lot of matches to go over, so 2 days of GSL qualifiers. That is tomorrow and the day after, so that is going to be what we're going to be prioritizing as well. And yeah, it's been a lot of good fun, a lot of StarCraft coming up ahead of us. There isn't just the next season of GSL, we have WTL Code S, we have DreamHack Winter that's around the corner as well. A lot of StarCraft, so definitely keep your eye out on us and keep your eye out on everyone as well. I know Pig's running events, Wardy's running events. Oh, and of course we still have our own regular casting that we do here on the CranKy Ducklings as well. And we're going to be starting things off with a PvZ, with the KSL, with the Korean Starcraft League, week number 27. If you are unfamiliar with this tournament, this event is live, I believe, Friday nights in America and Saturday mornings in, like, Korea, in most places in Asia, in Oceania. So Friday night, Saturday morning, kind of part of the week. Every single week we do host, or the KSL is hosted. It's an event that's targeted for the Korean scene. It's open to anyone, but we have very few Europeans. It's a very rough time slot for European players, so very rarely do we have any Europeans. Very rarely do we have any Americans as well, or North Americans. If we do ever have any, it's typically the NA players that are living in Korea. I'm talking about like Future or Astrea or Scarlet as well. Speaking of, we do have Astrea. That's going to be kicking things off, and DIMAGA as well. Okay, like I know who. Obviously, I know ahead of time that we're going to be casting these 2 players, but I was just talking about it. This is typically a really bad time for Europeans, so DIMAGA going a bit degen. I want to say that this event is at like 3 or 4 a.m. DIMAGA time. Like it's not good. Like it's deep in the degen hours. Either he stayed up until like 4 a.m. or he woke up really early. Wish the best to Papa DIMAGA. But yeah, really interesting, really exciting to see him competing in this tournament. Again, we don't really get a lot of Europeans in KSL, so happy to see DIMAGA here. Always happy to see. Oh. And yeah, that's gonna be our first series. It's gonna be Astrea versus DIMAGA. We're big fans of DIMAGA on this channel. We cast him whenever we can, and he always does, match up quite well with a lot of these other top tier players. Do know DIMAGA is at times a little bit underrated, but he's always a treat to watch. And of course, Astrea is on the rise, is on the up and up. He is peaking, or it feels like he's peaking as a player, and he's really improving a lot. He's really doing a great job at solidifying himself as the best in North America. Now that Neeb has retired, Astrea has stepped up, and he stepped up quite well. He is the NA regional champion of DreamHack Summer. Of course, DreamHack Winter is around the corner to see if he can reprise his role and hold on to his crown in NA. See if he can pull that off, as we will jump into our first series. As we get into this, and again, if you want to support the KSL, if you want these replays yourself, then !KSL in the chat. You will get a link to the Patreon page of the KSL, and it is fully funded by the community. So again, a big shout out to the immense amount of support that we do get over on the Patreon of KSL. But here we go. We're getting into our first series, into our first best of 3, and spawning in the bottom left-hand corner, we have the American Protoss player representing Maturino Esports. It is Astrea. And spawning in the top right-hand corner, we have his opponent. We have the Ukrainian Zerg player representing Berserker Esports. It is DIMAGA. We go. Gonna be a PvZ to kick things off, but a very special PvZ, as we do have a bit of a, a denial here of the expansion for DIMAGA. Is gonna be forced to take the unnatural natural. I say special because, again, Astrea, he can play standard, don't get me wrong. He's more than willing to play standard at any turn, even very macro oriented as well. But despite that, he's also been known to do his own thing and kind of take his own twists and turns, and Astrea, he's always a treat to watch. Similar to DIMAGA, I do appreciate that we have some players at this level of play that are very stylistic in nature. A lot of players are like that, actually, whether it's Gumiho or Kyor or Björn, even Maru, when it comes to the Terrans, like, they're all very stylistic in their own way. Same can be said with, like, Hero, Classic, and Astrea. DIMAGA as well. So yeah, what I mean by that, of course, is DIMAGA, he is known for his mid game. He is known for basically going up to 3-base saturation and not really going past that. Every now and then he's willing to go into a longer macro game, but more often than not, DIMAGA, he's one to cut saturation at 3 bases. I'm talking around 69, 70 workers max, just max out on Lingbane, Roach instead, and just snowball out of control and roll over the Protoss player and just keep the macro going, keep the pressure on. That's kind of where DIMAGA does thrive. And as long as he can get there, as long as he can get to his 3-base saturation, then he can go toe-to-toe with the best Protoss out there in the world. Meanwhile, Astrea, on the other side of things, is willing to really be quirky with his openers. Sure, he's willing to go like Stargate into Oracle, into Blink and +1, don't get me wrong, like any good standard Protoss player, but he's also willing to like go for like Robo openers into Colossus drops or Twilight Council into DT opener instead. He's willing to like mix things up and explore other avenues of PvZ that are otherwise sometimes kind of left by the wayside. This time, it is going to be a Stargate opener, so as much as I would love to see Astrea be a little bit quirky, for now, it's standard stuff here from our Protoss. I don't know how familiar Astrea is with DIMAGA. I know DIMAGA does ladder on the Korean server. I know he's, very active, especially in ESL Open Cup Asia as well. But despite that, is Astrea, again, familiar with him? Does he know his strengths and weaknesses? Or is Astrea going for a Stargate opener just to feel out his opponent? Meanwhile, the Adept is just shading between the bases, looking for any kind of worker kills. Does get a Ling, but nothing much else, as the Adept is forced back. At the same time, the Overlord across the map doesn't get to see too much, does spot a Stalker, which can be a little bit suspect. You typically don't get a Stalker without good reason, unless you do plan on denying scouting. As we can see, though, it's still just a Stargate opener. It's going to be an Oracle first. Astrea is just keeping DIMAGA in the dark as he expands and takes the third. Third is on the way. Oracle does reveal itself, and again, it looks like Astrea, he's more concerned with killing this Overlord and sniping vision than he is with getting damage done across the map. Overlord goes down to supply block DIMAGA for a moment, and Astrea is just waiting for his second Oracle before he really becomes too aggressive as he moves out with his first. Getting across the map, DIMAGA, he's in position. There are 2 queens at his third. There are 2 queens in his main. He has the tools that he needs to defend. As long as he doesn't get pulled out of position, he should be okay. So far, so good. Again, the Oracle is looking for damage, is dragging these queens over towards the natural base, but DIMAGA, he doesn't chase too far. At the same time, his lings do confirm the third is being taken, so now he's fully aware that it's not going to be a 2-base all-in or anything crazy like that. Does confirm the third, and oh my god, Astrea. Now this goes back to what I said in the beginning, and now I feel validated. Astrea, he's a little bit quirky, he's willing to divert from the norm, and he is rushing. Oh, as he loses an Oracle. Big blow here for Astrea, but he's finding a couple of drones, he's rushing into a fleet beacon, and a second Stargate. It's a double Stargate carriers. He's rushing into Skytos, because of course he is. On top of that, 4 drones go down across the map. 4 drones for 1 Oracle. This is a better trade for DIMAGA. DIMAGA does, you know, fare better in the end. But Astrea, he's really more concerned with keeping DIMAGA busy, keeping his attention back at home. And DIMAGA has been unable to scout yet. He hasn't been able to confirm too much of anything. He's still on hashtag, still just droning. 2 more drones go down. 4th base is on the way. And yeah, DIMAGA, he's just more concerned with, you know, focusing on his saturation. He double expands. Oh my god. Takes 2 bases, and DIMAGA still has not started up that lair. Now, I'm concerned. The reason why I'm concerned about the late lair timing is that typically the lair coincides with the scout, because once you get the lair, you can morph in an overseer, and then you can send the overseer across the map to figure out what's going on. DIMAGA, he's cutting a lot of corners. He's got +1 melee on the way, which is fine. He's got a lot of lings on the way, but again, still no lair, and that means that he's going to be in the dark for a very long time. He's going to be fanning out his lings, he's going to be sending them out across the map, and he's going to confirm whether or not there's a fast 4th base. He's going to confirm any kind of move out, but there is no move out. The carriers, they have arrived. They're here at the 3rd, still unscouted, by the way. Lair finally in production here for DIMAGA. We're working on a Roach Warren, we're taking gases. First 2 carriers are moving out. Now, thankfully... Oh, do we see him? No, Bobby. We don't see the carriers. Link checks the 3rd base, so the carriers have not been spotted. They're moving out now. To be fair, DIMAGA, he has a decent queen count. He's got 7 queens. That's okay. I do think we can survive here, but the interceptors, they have been unloaded. And Astrea is looking to lay siege upon this base. Now, DIMAGA cannot afford to bleed out queens. He has to try to pull them together, keep them alive. We have more spore crawlers on the way. Overlords are being hunted down, and DIMAGA is going for a massive ling counterattack. He's got a lot of lings, papi. Not enough energy for transfuse. 1 queen goes down. Another queen does get saved at the same time. It looks like DIMAGA may be able to break this 3rd base location, but we have an overcharge. And mate, you can go up against a sea of lings, but 1 overcharge, 1 a death, that's all you need, papi, as we have the Oracle going ham. More carriers are coming in to reinforce. The lings, they do nothing. Across the map, how many queens have gone down? 2 queens so far. And these carriers, they should be fine. The creep shred leaves much to be desired, and Astrea, he can't just back off. He gets another queen and another, and he's snowballing out of control. The carriers survive, and every queen is going to go down. Oof. And that's every queen. That's it. There's no more anti-air other than spore crawlers. We do see a massive link counterattack here at the 3rd base. Sorry, at the 4th, and we can maybe cancel the 4th. But Astrea doesn't care about a 4th. Like, he cares about his carriers, papi, as we get a full surround. And we are going to, of course, cancel. That's a kill, by the way. 400 minerals down the drain. Bit of a slip up there by Astrea. The spore crawlers are moving forward. But the spore crawlers can never get under these carriers, or they should never get under these carriers. Spire is on the way, but it's a late Spire because it was a late scout. And unfortunately, these lings, I mean, sure, they were able to kill a base, but it wasn't the biggest of deals. Colossus comes out, gets surrounded. Astrea fumbling the ball a little bit, but doesn't really matter. Like, the reality is that he's keeping the carriers alive, and that's really what matters. 4th base is going to go down for DIMAGA. 5th base is under threat. Corruptors are on the way. Lings are getting damage done, which is nice. Corruptors are in production. Lings are even in the main. Oh my god, 7 probes go down. Not bad. Not bad, but... yeah, looking at the resources lost here, that was 127 lings. 5th base goes down. We can always recall, and there we go. We do have a recall on these 2 carriers. It will be saved. They make it back home. And Astrea, he doesn't just have pure carrier. He only has 4. Sorry, he has 6. He has 6 carriers. Outside of that, he's got Archons, Zealots, Colossus. He's focusing on a ground-based army. He's not going pure Skytoss. He's not going up to 3 or 4 Stargates. He's stopping at 6 carriers and, you know, refining his army from there. DIMAGA down in economy, down in bases compared to the Protoss, which is something you never want to be seeing. As DIMAGA tries to expand, he's denied that hatchery. As Astrea is there at every turn. And DIMAGA has to play catch-up. Is there a world where can he come back in this game? Only if Astrea makes mistakes. If Astrea somehow overextends, if he, I don't know, moves out with a stray carrier here or there, like if DIMAGA is able to pull apart Astrea and force him to make mistakes, force him to expose himself, then sure, there's definitely a world where he can maybe come back. But outside of that, Astrea, he's looking quite solid here. The Corruptors, they dive on 4. They get 1 of the carriers. They get a 2nd carrier as well. But it's not about the carriers anymore. It's about everything else. As the overcharge keeps the rest of the army alive. DIMAGA trying to muster up a force. Carriers are being rebuilt. We're getting into Disruptors, +1 air attack. In Astrea, he's on 4 base saturation, which is much more than I can say for DIMAGA, who's still trying to get a 4th. And yeah, this game was just a little bit unfortunate that DIMAGA, he just wasn't able to figure out what was going on. He wasn't able to scout, was being a little bit greedy and being a little bit presumptuous by staying on hatch tech and going mass ling. And unfortunately, his lings didn't do enough. If you remember, he had a massive amount of lings, and when he went for a counterattack, he couldn't touch the 3rd. The 3rd was left pristine. He denied the 4th, which was okay. It was something. But GG gets called. Astrea will take the 1st game after successfully transitioning and hiding his carriers. GG. GG. Ooh. And this is something that has been rising in popularity over the past maybe month, maybe 2 months of play. If you're familiar with the Korean scene, with ESL 8, ESL 11 Cup Asia, with KSL, Classic and Hero have been very fond of this. I don't know if you noticed, but this wasn't your traditional Skytoss rush. This wasn't your traditional carrier rush. The beginning was, but typically, at least the way that Classic and Hero do it, is that they stop at 4 carriers. We saw Astrea go up to 6. I think the only reason he went up to 6 is because 2 of his carriers were very low, if you remember, on the left-hand side. But typically you stop at like 4, maybe 6 carriers, and then you just hard switch into ground toss, into Stalker production, Archon production. You don't really commit too hard to the Sky Toss. And the goal is to maybe hope your opponent overcommits. You expect to be scouted when you're doing this, so you don't expect to end the game, but like ideally you force an overcommitment, you force an overreaction, and then you can like catch them unawares with your stalkers, with your ground army instead, and get a win that way. So yeah, both Hero and Classic have been very fond of this playstyle, and clearly Astrea is trying it out as well, with success. With success. So GG, Astrea will take a 1-0 lead, and now we're going to be getting into game number 2. I don't expect Astrea to do this 2 games in a row. I expect this is typically something you do once in a series, whether it's a best of 3 or a best of 5. One time is what you want to be leaving this at, and you know that's also the strength here of it. Is initially it wasn't really looking too suspect, right? It was a Stargate opener into a multitude of oracles as well. So we'll see if our Protoss player can once again keep his opponent in the dark as to what he's up to. Spawning in the bottom right hand corner of Dragon Scales, we have the American Protoss player representing Maturino Esports. It is Astrea. And spawning in the top left hand corner, we have his opponent. We have the Ukrainian Zerg player representing Berserker Esports. It is DIMAGA. Go. See, I'm surprised he didn't hide the carriers until there was 4. That is definitely something you can do. But that double carrier timing is actually really strong. Like, especially if it goes unscouted. When those first 2 carriers arrive, I mean, we saw it, right? The first 2 carriers, they killed every queen. Every single queen. I think they got 3 overlords. Like, they more than paid for themselves, and they paved the way for the rest of the carriers, because once the queens start dying, it's like a snowball effect, right? Like, things very quickly escalate out of control. Suddenly you have less and less anti-air, you have less and less tools to defend, and yeah, it was everything going right for Astrea in that first game. Light, help me. Oh, step bro. Chase, you're an animal. Oh my god. Look, I've been fooled before, Chase. I'm not gonna be fooled again. You're not really stuck. As we're getting into this, we are getting into our second game, and again, really powerful start for Astrea. What's important is that in that last game, it was just a very specific build that worked to success, and a build that I'm sure Astrea won't need to do again this series, so he, I'm sure, has plenty more up his sleeve. We have yet to see his final form. Meanwhile, the pressure is on DIMAGA. This is a best of 3, by the way, so DIMAGA has to bring it back here and now to force the ace match, to make a series out of this. Once again, DIMAGA forced to take the unnatural natural, taking that third base location as his natural instead. Gonna make things a little bit more awkward in the early game to defend, especially against something like Glaive Adepts. Speaking of, Twilight Council opener, not a Stargate. So we can see Astrea is mixing it up, is switching up his builds, his openers, and this is what we were kind of talking about before. Like, again, Astrea, he's willing to divert from the norm. He can play standard, don't get me wrong, he can totally, he's more than willing to play standard, but more often than not, he's willing to just, you know, play much more aggressively. Just really mix things up. You know, the Adept does get across the map and is going to be able to shave off quite a lot of these Lings. Every single Ling's going to be going down. There's going to be a Twilight Council into the Robo. Gases have been pulled out, so this is going to be Glaive Adepts. Or this should be Glaive Adepts, not a Dark Shrine. And this shouldn't be an overcommitment either, as Glaives does commence. We have 1 additional gateway in the main base. We have 2 in the natural. We should be seeing a 4th gateway. We shouldn't go up to more than 4. Like 5 or 6 gateways, that's like borderline 2 base all in. This should just be an opener to allow Astrea to get ahead economically and to take a third base behind this. Now, what's important is that typically when you go for a Twilight Council opener, Stalkers are very commonplace because Stalkers deny scouting. But if you remember, last game we had a Stargate opener and we still made a Stalker anyway. So DIMAGA, upon seeing this wall, he's not really seeing too much. Like, this doesn't tell him much of anything about whether or not it's a Twilight Council or a Stargate. DIMAGA is still in the dark. Ooh, but he's throwing down a very early Roach Warren. Oh my god. Oh my, this was what, like a 3-minute 30 Roach Warren? Jesus. This is not a safety Roach Warren. This is an aggressive Roach Warren. DIMAGA cutting workers at 35. He's making a massive wave of Lings. DIMAGA wants to be the aggressor. And we're about to have like a bit of a Spider-Man meme here, where Astrea is coming out with these Glaive Adepts, and DIMAGA will have an army, but he's cutting workers very early on. With these roaches, he should survive though. He shouldn't lose much. As the Adepts do commit to the shade, Lings are here to surround, but the Lings are going to get annihilated. All the Lings do go down. The Adepts, they make their way into the mineral line, and this is really rough because DIMAGA was already cutting workers early on, and he's losing so many. 10 drones go down. That's already almost game-ending damage. Like, DIMAGA does not have an economy. He's down to 25 workers. The Adepts, they shade towards the third base. Queens are going down. Transfuse is not going to be enough. We commit to the shade, and DIMAGA is being pulled apart. He has roaches, but he can't keep up. He cannot keep up with these Adepts. They're just getting out of control. The Prism is forced back, but this is too much. This is game-ending damage, as 11 drones have gone down, and we're just focusing down as many as we can. DIMAGA, he's down to 10 workers, and he's all in. DIMAGA, he's trying to re-drone. He's waddling queens across the map, and DIMAGA's gonna make some magic happen as he moves out. Another queen falls. And back at home, Astrea, he's expanding. He's, working on a immortal production. GG gets called. Good luck in the next round. And Astrea will take the series 2-0, eliminating DIMAGA. GG. Yeah, just really unfortunate there for DIMAGA. He didn't really know what he was up against. He himself was going for his own... I'm pretty sure he was setting up for his own all-in, hoping to catch his opponent off guard, getting to, of course, Roaches really early on, Lings really early on. He wasn't quite, I think, even prepared mentally even to defend against those Glaive Adepts, and they just got an insane amount of damage done. It was crazy. Even the first Shade, remember, the first Shade killed 10 drones. That's enough. Like, 10 drones, that's already more than enough damage. And it just kept going. It kept going. And by the time the Adepts got cleaned up, by the time we tried to counterattack, we already had Immortals on the way. We already had a third base being set up with shield batteries. Like, as Astrea, he was in a perfect position to deal with that. So, GG, well played to Astrea. Unfortunately, DIMAGA having a really rough time here in these first two games in this series. Again, I don't think DIMAGA was able to really show off. This is the case for a lot of these aggressive Zerg players, but I feel like DIMAGA, he thrives when his opponent plays standard. If his opponent is going like Stargate Opener into a third base, into Blink and +1, like, mate, we've seen DIMAGA look good against Classic. We've seen him look decent against Hero. Like, DIMAGA, he can really thrive if you give him a standard game. But the moment that he's kind of forced to give up his like, not just his map control, but like forced to give up the driver's seat and like allow the Protoss player to really dictate the pace of the game, it does feel like DIMAGA can struggle at times to just try to keep up instead. I don't think he's used to reacting as much as he is forcing a reaction instead. At least in this matchup. Regardless, GG, well played. Shout out to DIMAGA, of course, not just for competing, but for staying up late at nights. I mentioned before, we don't get a lot of Europeans. We do not get many Europeans at all in KSL because it's just such a bad hour. So really cool to see DIMAGA taking part and competing in KSL. Always do appreciate it whenever Europeans do ruin their sleep schedules to play in this. Or it should be the other way around. We always champion European players that have ruined sleep schedules and decide to play in this. There you go. The D-Gens, Bobby, the D-Gens.